Hi, everyone. I'm Flora Pastorero.
And I'm Carrie Perry, and we are Chick2Chick.
All right, today's episode, we're talking about something that to me sounds so simple, so basic, so essential, but yet some kids don't get it. What I'm talking about is telling your kids you love them, showing your kids you love them, just squeezing them and just showing them tons and tons of affection. Did you have that growing up?
I did. I had a dad who would say to me, "You will never be too old to give your father a hug and a kiss goodbye." Do you understand me? You know, it was a threat and it was a promise. I mean, I think at the time I was like, but I truly, deeply appreciate that. And to this day, you know, my parents are very affectionate and loving people. So they were kind of ooey gooey. That's how we are.
I grew up the same way. I grew up with Italian parents and an Italian household. And, you know, if my cheek was squeezed one more time, like I thought like it was going to be permanently bruised because they're just squeezing cheeks and I love you, I love you, I love you. And, you know, hugs and kisses and the aunts and the grandmothers and everybody coming in. So I think when you grow up with something, this is your point of reference. So you think if this is the way you were raised, that of course everybody was raised like that.
Yeah.
But what's astonishing to me is how many adults that I encounter and how many adult friends of mine who tell me that their parents never told them that they love them. And I'm like,
I don't get it.
What?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
You know, I know that my mother had a good relationship with her parents. I think she was closer to her father. My grandmother was not an affectionate woman. We used to joke, and I called my grandmother Tassie. Don't ask me how I arrived at that name. But we used to joke and go, "Give me a Tassie hug." Okay, imagine your hands down at your side and you just kind of lean in a little bit, you know, kind of go
Real
like that.
cold.
Real cold. It was, we joked, "Oh, let's give a Tassie hug." I knew she loved me, but I don't remember that. And my mom, instead of carrying on that, of not being, you know, mushy gushy lovey with me, you know, she did, in fact, she did decide to sort of break the cycle of
which
it.
is good.
Yeah, she
because
did.
sometimes if you're raised that way, you think then that's the way you're supposed to treat your own children.
Absolutely.
But you know, your mom recognized it and she broke the cycle.
Yeah.
I didn't get to see my grandmother that much because she lived in Italy. But boy, oh boy, oh boy, when she did see me, like she'd give me these big bear hugs. I'm like, Nunny, I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Aww.
Like, yeah, she just loved me up as much as she could because I didn't get a chance to see her that often. My grandfather as well. So again, this is what my point of reference is and what your point of reference is. And so you think that everybody is just flooded with love, but in fact, that is not the case. And I'm meeting so many adults, again, who were starved of that affection, and it's really had an impact on them. Our guest today is Amanda Levison. She is a licensed professional counselor with Neurofeedback and Counseling Center of Pennsylvania. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. Amanda, what Carrie and I are talking about, in your practice, is this a common problem? Are you hearing from a lot of adults who are coming in saying to you, my mom and dad didn't love me and didn't show me love and didn't tell me that they loved me when I was a child? Do you hear that a lot? Is that a common problem?
It is very common, and it's interesting because people don't come to counseling appointments to just say, well, this is what it is. A lot of time it's trying to dig through what's happening for them, and then you later find out. And sometimes it's not so much that my parents didn't love me, but it comes out that my parents were always working, they weren't really around. And then later you find out, you know, well, what about dinner time? What about bedtime? What was your routine? And, you know, come to find out that the parents are kind of more in passing or even putting them down and insulting rather than boosting them up.
That is sad to me.
That
is so sad to me because I think about who I am based on the nurturing that I've received. And I think now as an adult, I'd much rather be the kind that was like, oh, my parents were always loving on me versus that. And I mean, do you think, Amanda, that this is one of the things that truly defines how a person grows? Like, is there a time in their life, like in their early teens, when this would have been a monumental thing to know and really appreciate your parents loved you, but because it didn't happen, it's sort of like their growth has stunted as people? Is that something you're finding?
I wouldn't say as people, but in relationships, when it comes to, interactions with people, that's where it may be more stunted. It doesn't mean that these people can't function in society. It doesn't mean that they don't have wonderful jobs or can be in healthy relationships. It just means that maybe hugging someone in a greeting may be a little awkward for them, or hearing I love you from friends or in relationships may be more difficult for them. And a lot of times I've heard from people that they'll learn from their spouse or significant other or someone they admire for how to behave when they do have children themselves, because they understand that they don't want to be like what their parents modeled for them.
So they wanted to break the cycle, just as Carrie had mentioned.
Right. And so a lot of times watching if their spouse is very affectionate, watching them and kind of letting them take over, and even saying, I love you, but it might take a while for them to really genuinely have that in them, because it's been kind of pushed back for them.
Yeah. Why do you think that parents, again, this is just a foreign concept to me. If I tell my son I love him one more time, I think he's just going to I think he's just been like, Mom, really? Like, Mom, stop. Every time he walks in the house, I love you, I hug him, and he's like, yeah, I heard you. Yeah. So why do you think a parent would withhold that? Why wouldn't a parent love on their child? Why wouldn't a parent hug them and smush them and just smother them with affection? This is foreign to me. Why wouldn't you do that? And why did that happen?
So a lot of times when you look at these relationships, it's a learned behavior. So years and years of not being told may be uncomfortable. And, I've even looked in my personal life. I could say that, some family members are much more affectionate than other family members. And it doesn't mean that they don't love you, and it doesn't mean that they don't care, but they may show their love in different ways. And again, it's, some people, it's about their upbringing and what they're comfortable with. So if one generation was not saying I love you and was not mushy gushy, the next one, they may say I love you here and there, but it's very difficult to go complete opposite from what they know, what their norm is.
What is the significance and the power of those three words? Because, some people be like, I show you every day that I do things, but what is it about those three words that just can change you as a person when you hear them?
I think the key is vulnerability, right? Because we could sit here and say to our kids, I love you, and we're putting ourselves in a vulnerable position in a way, because yes, our children may know that we love them, but given that someone else in a relationship, if we said, I love you, it's almost like, well, do you love me back? What's going on? There's always that question. So vulnerability is really there in every aspect, because where you could say, I know I love my kids, maybe there's other family members that you feel you need to love, and maybe you don't feel the same way that maybe other family members do. You could take a grandparent, and a lot of times we could say, well, I love my grandparents, and you may feel much closer with one than the other. It might be a lot easier to tell the one you love them versus the other, and it doesn't mean you don't love them. There's just these different levels.
So, but you brought up the vulnerability. So if you take a child, for instance, and they know deep down inside that, yeah, my mom and dad love me, they do things for me, but boy, they never say, I love you. Does that then make the child question? Because they're not hearing it. When you brought up that important word, vulnerability, does it leave that little bit of doubt in the child's mind going, yeah, I mean, they show me that they love me and they do things for me, but they don't say it.
Absolutely. And I think also what you're saying, though, is that they show me that they love me, but as a child, we don't know what love really is without being told, right? So, like, you could take teenagers, they meet someone at school and they'll be like, oh my God, I love them. They're my best friend. Like when they met them, like day one.
Right.
So I think that for kids, it's more like if you did things for them, they may say, I know my parents love me because they do this for me. But let's say parents are hardworking and they're very busy and they may be very involved. But from the kid's stance, if they're not hearing I love you, if maybe they're not in a financial position to spoil them, they may feel like, well, do they love me? I don't know if they do or not. They're around, but, I don't really know.
That's a good point. I wonder, how many times, if say there's someone listening right now and they're trying to sort of break that cycle, or they know as a parent, geez, I know I'm doing all these things for my kids, but I honestly, consciously can't remember the last time I actually said it. And maybe this is a person who, like you said, that's not where they have come from in their life, and they don't feel that it's something they can do. If there's a person who is listening and they really want to start to become vulnerable, I guess, in that way, like you mentioned, how can they do it? I mean, it seems, like you were saying, Flora, it seems so commonplace for us to say, I love you.
I don't get it.
I've told you I love you because I do love you.
And I've told you I love you too.
And we did it a lot of times.
I love you more.
I love you. And I'm not saying that just to slap those three words around, but I'm wondering if there's someone on the other end of this conversation who's listening, and they need to know how to do it. How do you say I love you and bring in that vulnerability?
So I think by warming it up, the idea, right? You have to do baby steps. You're not going to go from not really saying it to all of a sudden saying it every time you come and go or get off the phone, any type of exit or morning type of routine. So it would be with the baby steps. It would be having a good situation where maybe you talk to your child at night, you put them to bed, and you say, I really do love you. I just want you to know how much you mean to me, and see how your child responds. And most likely they will be very excited, or they may be a little surprised, but inside really happy. And kind of warm it up with that. And then as you get more comfortable, you could use it more loosely, like when you're getting off the phone, or if, dropping them off at school or at an event or something.
So with these adults that you've talked to, and you said that they come in and they talk to you and they have issues, and you get to the root of it, of what their problem was, that they didn't hear I love you, the parent didn't show them. How do you help these adults who you say can then have relationship issues?
So then it's looking at, well, where is this happening in your relationship? What cycles are repeating itself? And what are you happy with in your relationship? And what are you not happy with? And let's just say they say, well, every time someone says, I love you, I feel really uncomfortable. So then it's getting them to feel comfortable with the idea, getting them to process what's happening for them. But it's really rare that I've had people that get in a position like that where they can't hear it as an adult. It's almost like they want to hear it. They want more and more and more. And when they do struggle in relationships, it's more of, well, what would it take to be in a more committed relationship, or something where you can feel comfortable and to be vulnerable with someone? Because a lot of times people will want to avoid when it gets really serious, like they got in a fight or / argument over something, and they break up, and that's over because they don't want to feel the pain of being hurt.
I've actually talked to a couple of adults who said they just can't go there. That like they might be in a relationship, but they can't get to that serious part because they never heard those words from their parent.
That just makes me sad.
I know.
And I know there's some people who they have the wherewithal to recognize it, and they want to do better, and they want to be better, and so they'll talk, to someone about it. And that's my
But,
hope
I
for
think
people.
it's
Yeah.
different with everything when it comes to relationships, because I have a girlfriend of mine who is happily married and has children, and her husband is like a wonderful husband from what she tells me. And prior to them getting engaged, he never said, I love you. And she was telling me that, I'm debating about breaking up with him because I want to move forward. I'm at that point in my life. And he won't tell me he loves me, but I think he loves me. And literally about a week later, he proposed and he said he loved her. And, he was raised in a loving household with parents who are very affectionate. I was actually very good friends with his sister, so I know that it was a loving household. But he never told a girlfriend before. So it was really hard for him to get to that place. So it's not always just because you're brought up a certain way. It's that he wanted to make sure he saved it for the person he wanted the rest of his life with.
That's different.
It is.
I think
Yeah.
that's different, and that's sweet, and that's beautiful. But that's a completely different.
But she still went a long
Right.
time without the I love you.
Yeah.
Right.
I would have bolted. I'd have been like, bye.
I'm sorry. Do you have something
I
to
like
say?
you. I like you a lot. Wow, good for her that she stuck with it.
Yeah.
That's a tough one, because when you're in a relationship and you're putting so much time and effort into it, and committing and whatnot, and if you think the other person doesn't love you,
Well, going
you're
back to
like-
that whole vulnerability part, if you're the person who is being vulnerable and you're with someone who just can't be and can't get there, that just leads to a lot of, animosity and anger.
Right. So bringing that back in, if someone is raised a certain way, so yes, these people who were not told that their parents loved them, they can function in society. They could have a normal life. They could have normal friendships and relationships to a certain degree. But that's when it also comes to what happens when these hiccups come up for them.
and how do they deal with it?
Exactly.
All good stuff. Amanda, thanks so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank
Great
you, Amanda.
conversation.
It was good.
It's again, I find it to be so sad when I hear this from adults. I think parents today are a little bit different.
I think so too. People are allowed to express how they really feel. Kids feel more comfortable telling their parents how they really feel about things. I think we're in a more expressive space of time right now.
Yeah,
Maybe
sometimes
too
my
much.
would agree
son
with that.
tells me things I don't want to
Yeah.
hear. It's like, okay, I did not need to hear that.
Yeah.
But the good thing is I do think that parents today have changed.
Yeah.
Versus parents, as my son likes to say, back then.
Back in the day.
Back then, I think he thinks we were all raised in a cave. That I do think that they do show more affection. They say, I love you more often, and it's all for the child's benefit.
Yeah. Well, that's who it always should be for.
Yeah, very beneficial.
Exactly.
All right.
That's good stuff.
So, as always, we'd love to hear from you. You have any thoughts, any ideas, any comments, any feedbacks?
Do you want to tell us I love
Did you love us? Because
Yeah,
we love
we're
you.
So come on, let's share the love, right?
Send us an email. We're
at Chick2Chick at penwatch.org. You had me flustered with the
I
voice.
see that.
Love it, love
Carrie,
it.
I love
it.
you.
Maybe I can get this heart right
I
someday.
can't do
We're
that.
really terrible at that.
I
look like we're
just-
making claws in our hearts.
I can't.
But you know
I'm just
what?
going to make a circle and just imagine it's a
coming
heart.
from our hearts.
It
Yeah, we
is.
appreciate
It
you being
is.
here, and we love that you listen to our podcast. So anytime you have something to say, yes, it's Chick2Chick at penwatch.org.
Love you.
Love you.
And we love you. And we'll be back soon to chirp about another topic.